Do you want Detroit sports talk done right?
Yeah!
If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's April 7th, 2021. That means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit sports talk with Eno and Big Al. I am the Big Al of the equation. My name's Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He's quite the bon vivant, and he has the cutest dog this side of the Mississippi, and that would be Greg Eno. How's things, Greg?
Doing quite well, Mr. Beaton. Good to see you. We've been off for a little while. You were a little under the weather the last time we were supposed to record. So
for good reason, but I was feeling a little under the weather.
Yeah, and good to see you again. I wanted to know, are you any relation to Weird Al? Somebody wanted to know if you're any relation to Weird Al, and I said I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, I used to have a mustache like that when I was like 18. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh gosh, it's good to be with you. I'm recording outside. It's April 7th, and I'm actually recording outside tonight. It's so lovely here in Metro Detroit. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can read that every week. I did a piece the other day, just kind of ruminating about box scores and how much I miss box scores in the newspapers. So check me out there. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Of course, follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. Lots to talk about because we haven't been with you in a month. We do have although it's predominantly Lions and Tigers to talk about. I'm not sure if we'll get into the Pistons or the Red Wings. We'll see. But always a lot of stuff to talk about when we haven't been with you for a month. But before we get to any of that, we're going to play a game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Knows pretty much how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive, now stay with me here, he'll receive I hosted the Knee Jerks for 12 years and all I got was this stupid t-shirt. That's what you'll get. This person, Al, made his name in football. I will tell you that. He was born on this date in 1954, so he's 67 years old today. He was a skill position player. I will tell you that. He played almost all but one of his years. He played in the NFC East. I will tell you that. Yeah. And I will tell you also that he is a Hall of Famer.
What day was his birthday again?
1954.
1954. So he played in the 70s, 80s. Played in the East, you said, and was
NFC East.
NFC East, and was a Hall of Famer.
Skill position.
Wilbert Montgomery.
Pro and college Hall of Fame.
I'll try Wilbert Montgomery.
That's a good guess. It's not Wilbert, but that's right in that same ballpark in terms of his age.
Yeah.
No. Wrong team. So I will tell you that's the wrong team so you can eliminate the Eagles from future guesses. So, no, it's not Wilbert, who was a Lion for a brief period of time, by the way. But no. We will try to tackle this with clue number two.
All right. With that, let's move on to the hot take section of the podcast, which will be the next hour to hour 45 minutes, depending on how much we rant. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Tigers. Season has started, and there's a new cult hero in town, and his name is Akil Baddoo. So we'll talk about a little bit of Baddoo Mania, which has actually been quite refreshing to have something positive about this team. Obviously, we'll go into a little bit of what's going on with the Tigers right now. They started the season 3-3, and what the roster's shaping up to look like, and what we've seen so far a week into the season. With the Lions, before we even move on to that, we also want to talk a little bit about what's going on with baseball in the All-Star game. Politics are always going to be in sports, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Comes to the Lions, more roster moves. We'll talk about how it's affected them and any rumors going on when it comes to the draft. If we got time, we'll touch a little bit on what's going on with COVID with, say, the Canucks and the Washington Nationals, and also the Red Wings, who are in tank mode, but they do have the NHL trade deadline in 5 days. So hopefully we'll have a little bit, maybe something to talk about that. But it really isn't a lot going on with the Wings and the Pistons other than they are in tank mode and they are shuffling the roster around. So I think everybody in town, Greg, is excited about the Tigers right now. So let's kick off the Tigers. And we might as well start off with the living legend that is Akil Baddoo. This is Akil's world, and we're all living in it right now.
Yeah.
He's 22 years old. He was obviously the Tigers' Rule 5 pick this past winter. And in order to stay with he has to stay with the Tigers the entire year on the Major League roster, or he has to be given back, or at least offered back to the Twins. Well, the kid tore it up in spring training. I believe he ended up hitting like 420 in spring training. So right then and there, that pretty much said he's going to go up north with the Tigers, and they're going to do the Victor Reyes thing with him again. But I think the difference between him and Reyes, this guy looks like Baddoo has a higher ceiling than Victor Reyes. I think Victor Reyes is a fourth outfielder type. Right? Baddoo seems to have just seem to be more athletic, have a higher skill. His skills just seem to be sharper and better all around compared to Reyes. But we didn't, going into the season, we figured, okay, they might be like Reyes. He'll get 150 at-bats, and they'll kind of shelter him. And then next year, we'll see him, he'll be in the minor leagues. Maybe he'll be in the bigs in 2 or 3 years. That's what's happened with Reyes, and that strategy paid off of him. But on Sunday, Baddoo saw the lineup for the first time. First pitch he ever saw, Greg, in the big leagues, he deposited it into the left field seats. And it's been nothing but a rocket ship since then. He's played, right now, since then, in 4 games, he has become a cult hero. He's slashing .455. He hasn't walked at all because he's hitting so well. He is .455 with a slugging percentage of 1.182. That's a 1.6 OPS. He's got 2 home runs, 7 RBI, and includes the home run on the first pitch he ever saw, a grand slam on Sunday. He had a game-winning walk-off single on it was yesterday, and then today he had a triple. And also had an outfield assist throwing out a base runner at second base. This guy is, right now, he is in the American League lead, I think, for the MVP, Rookie of the Year. And, well, actually, he's become the talk of baseball. And who knows how it's going to write out, because as soon as we start talking about this, people bring up, well, what about Chris Shelton? Remember Brennan Bosch, Quentin Berry, or, And, all these guys had their moments in the sun and then faded. But I think the difference is, one, Baddoo is younger. Like, Quentin Berry was a career minor league guy who was, I think, in his mid-late 20s by the time he came up. Chris Shelton had already been in the majors for like a year as a Rule 5 guy in 2005. Then he had that hot April in 2006. And then by, mid-season, he was back in the minors. Brennan Bosch played like an all-star for half a season, and then he disappeared. So, we always have to kind of, grain of salt, knock on wood kind of things. But it would be really, really nice if this franchise could actually strike gold with a young ball player and actually find an everyday guy who's going to be in the lineup for 10 years. I think the last guy like that came, I wouldn't say came out of nowhere, but was productive as immediately as he came up in the big leagues is probably going back to Curtis Granderson. And then before that, you can count them on one hand. Castellanos, Granderson, Travis Fryman, Tony Clark. And that's going back, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So, even though Baddoo is not a product of the Tigers system, the guy hasn't played baseball in essentially 2 years. He was hurt in 2019. Or hurt his what's it? I think it was his shoulder or elbow. So he played very little. He played, had maybe half a season 2019. Obviously, last year he lost completely because of COVID. Because of the shutdown. So all of a sudden he shows up in his spring training and he hasn't stopped hitting yet. So it's a fun ride. Who knows if it's going to last or even he's going to cool off. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it.
Right.
I guess the hope is that maybe the Tigers have actually stumbled onto a legit major league ball player, because it's not like he's getting meatballs and crushing them. He's hitting some off-speed stuff. He's got plate discipline. He's been, he's working counts. He's just not going up there and hacking. And I think that's what impresses people, is that he looks like he belongs and is just not hacking. He's actually showing discipline at the plate, and that alone is shocking for a Tiger player.
I think the whole team has shown a lot of discipline at the plate. I was really impressed.
Like Robbie Grossman, for example.
Grossman, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew that.
That was his calling card, was his on-base percentage.
But, I haven't watched a full game yet, but I've been watching bits and pieces of just about every game that they played except for today.
Yeah.
And I've really been impressed with the pitches they've taken. Not the pitches they've swung at, but the pitches they've taken. I see a different. I'm not sure if that's the influence of Scott Coolbaugh, the new hitting coach, or Hinch or whatever, but this is a totally different approach. And you and I have long, and a lot of other Tiger fans have long bemoaned the Tigers' lack of plate discipline. This is going on for even in the Jim Leland years. But this is really something, at least so far. I think only 5-6 games, but so far I really enjoy watching these at-bats. These are really good at-bats, really good. The at-bat you talked about, the game winner, the walk-off on Tuesday, was another good at-bat by Baddoo. Not so much in that he took a lot of pitches, because it wasn't that kind of an at-bat, but just the way, like you said, the way he goes up there, the way he looks like he's been in the big leagues for a while. I think you put it really well when you said he doesn't look like he's up there hacking. Right. He's really like a professional hitter. I hate to use that term, but it really does look like that. Mm-hmm. And the thing about baseball, Al, that's so great about the game and what I love about it is that it can put these previously unheralded players, or even players who've been around for a while, the spotlight can shine on them for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. And it's amazing. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Now, sometimes it'll last the entire year, like with Mark Fidrich and with Fernando Valenzuela when he broke in and threw nothing but shutout innings all over the place when he first broke in. And Valenzuela, of course, ended up being a pretty good pitcher. Fidrich, of course, we all know was short-lived. But it's amazing that the game is set up in such a way that mediocre guys can throw perfect games. Right. Mediocre hitters can have a day at the plate that even Babe Ruth would never have been able to have. And that's what's so great about the game, because it's so individualistic. And as far as Baddoo goes, all I can say is just enjoy the ride. Yeah. My concern with a guy like that is what happens when he starts to cool off, and when he starts to when the pitchers start to figure him out a little bit more, maybe start scuffling. But that's where guys like a manager like A.J. Hinch, a veteran hitting coach like Coolbaugh can really come into play when these guys start to struggle. Anybody can go up there and enjoy being hot for a week. It's great. But, try going 2 for 25. Then what happens? And some of those at-bats may not all be bad either. Guys can go in slumps and they hit line drives at players. You keep it snake bit and being in a slump doesn't mean you're swinging poorly necessarily. But what does it do to his psyche when that happens? So far, one of the things that Hinch has said about Baddoo is one of the things they like about him is what goes on up here. They really like what goes on between the ears. And Hinch was almost talking about that more than the actual physical talent that this kid has. So we'll see. But for now, it's great. It's fun. He did all those things at home, which was nice, even though they've got a limited crowd, but still. And he's got a fun name. It's a fun name to say. So he's got a lot going for him. And they showed his parents in the stands his first game there, and when he hit the home run and so forth. So, good for him. We'll see how long it lasts. But the good thing, Al, is that the Tigers aren't counting on him. You mentioned guys like Quentin Berry and Shelton and Bosch. And Shelton, came out of spring training knowing that he was going to be a starter, and he had played the year prior. They knew a little bit more about what they had with him, and they got off to such a hot start in 2006 that you had to keep him in the lineup. Bosch, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bosch was a mid-season call-up. I think.
I know he was. He didn't start the season with the Tigers.
No. But Bosch and Shelton were looked at a little bit more. I think that the Tigers expected a little bit more out of these guys because they kind of did indeed come through the system, were groomed a little bit. Baddoo, anything to get out of Baddoo, who of course, like you said, is Rule 5. Right. If the Tigers don't keep him on the roster the whole year, of course, he goes back to the Twins. But anything to get out of this Baddoo is gravy because when you went into the season, you didn't say, well, we need to get 20 home runs out of Baddoo. No, you just whatever we get out of this kid is great. So that's what's nice about it. But of course, the more he produces this fast, the fans are going to get a little spoiled. But I'm sure everybody will realize that he's going to come crashing down to earth. We don't know where he'll be at the end of the year if he'll be with the Tigers necessarily. But if he's not, everybody can still have this week that he's just had as a good memory. He's already provided the fans with a good memory of the season already.
Yeah, it's yeah, and actually, I know I just brought up Bosch's stats, and actually he ended up playing a lot more than I actually remembered. He actually
at bats or something, didn't he?
What's that?
Did he get like 400 at bats one year?
Oh, actually, between 2011 and his hot start was 2010.
Right.
And he had the most at bats of his career that year. He had over 500.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and plate appearances, I should say. He had 464 at bats, but actually he had over 400 at bats in 2011 and 2012 as well. Yeah, which kind of surprised me. But then again, he was a running league average player those first 2 years. Even if you do take out that first month where he looked like Fred Lynn, reincarnated, he had an OPS of 799. 800 is a solid OPS his second year in the league, and then the wheels fell off, and he was out of the league. He was 25 when he came up, and he was out of the league when he was 30.
He had a long swing, if I remember.
Yes, big, long, looping swing.
And that was might have been his downfall, but
but actually, Bosch ended up having a longer career than I remember because he did bounce around after that. He ended up with the Yankees, Angels, and the Reds. Even though the only team he was a regular with was the Tigers at the time. Which is kind of surprising because those years as well, the Tigers were good.
Yeah.
They were contenders, and Bosch is getting 460 at-bats a year, which kind of surprised me. But think of it this way, though. All Baddoo, if Baddoo even comes up with a Brennan Bosch-like rise and fall, to get 3 years of productive baseball out of a Rule 5 pick would be a success. The hope here is that you got more than that. You actually may have an everyday player who you can plug in the middle of the lineup for the next decade or something. That's the best case. And there have been Rule 5 guys who have done that. Usually it falls more like pitchers and position guys. But it's weird how I think, when it comes to Alavila, he seems to do okay when it comes to Rule 5 guys and finding guys on the scrap heap like Jonathan Scope, who was very successful pickup last year and playing well again this year. And but it's the trades and things like that that people have issues with. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's enjoyable. I guess the thing is what is so refreshing about this is that it's nice to have a player on this team that gets you legit excited, even if it's short term right now. If it does, who knows if they'll hold up? But I've been able to watch majority of the games, and every time he comes up, it's like I gotta stop and watch to see what happens. And when's the last time you can say that about any Tiger? Maybe you'd have to go back to a Justin Verlander start or something like that. Back when it was must see JV. But it's only been 4 games, and the guy's been crazy good in those 4 games. But it's just, for a fan base that has been literally starved for anything positive to cheer about, to see Baddoo just bust out like this, I think has given a fan base that needed something to cheer about. They got that thing, and they desperately needed that, this fan base.
Yeah, for sure.
But when it comes to the Tigers, I think from all accounts, Greg, I think they do look like a better team than they were last year, but they're still not good. But I still think they're going to be a better team. Let me ask, what do you think of A.J. Hinch so far? Because they do seem to be doing some of the smaller things right. They seem to be a little... I don't know if it's... Again, we're talking small sample sizes.
Right.
But, in yesterday's game, they were able to pulled in the infield, and I think they did it twice, where they threw guys out at the plate, pulled in infields. They've... when Casey Mize's start, he got bailed out because he had called the shift, and it worked because a ground ball right up the middle, and Scoop was sitting there right there for it, things like that. He seems to have, in spring training, Hinch talked over and over about versatility, and we have seen that in a big way. I think we've seen Cabrera, Scope, Harold Castro play first base. I don't like seeing Harold Castro play first base, but regardless, he's been out there. DH has had 5 different guys, for example. It looks like the outfield, there's 4 or 5 guys he wants to get playing time for. So he's moving pieces around, we've seen Victor Reyes in center field, for example. Today we had Baddoo was in left field, and it's he's moving things around, and he seems to really value versatility. Mm-hmm. And I can understand that. It's just that there's kind of a fine line between valuing versatility and playing bad players, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Do you want Nico Goodrum, for example, had a good day today. I think he had 3 or 4 hits. But do you want Nico Goodrum? Is Nico Goodrum good enough to be shifting guys willy-nilly around the field just to get him in the lineup? That I'm still not convinced about.
Well, the thing that strikes me about Hinch is that he seems to really get it. I mean, he seems to really be a very smart guy. We always kind of knew that from afar, watching him in Houston. Mm-hmm. But watching him now at these post-game pressers and kind of reading his quotes throughout since spring training has begun, and just watching the videos I've seen of him when he's been available to the media, he just seems really. This is not a knock on Ron Gardenhire, but he just seems to be really sharp and really seems to have seems to be a well organized. A guy who knows he has a philosophy, and you and I have kind of badmouthed guys like Matt Patricia, for example, were trying to put a square peg in a round hole when it comes to the system. But in this case, I think it's good. I think the Tigers have lacked that system of playing, and Hinch seems to bring with him a system, a way of that he wants, a vision of how he wants things to be done. He's got a lengthy contract. Mm-hmm. He's young. I mean, he's got a chip on his shoulder to kind of because of what happened in Houston, and he wants to prove himself and everything. And so there's a lot that he wants to do too individually, but he just seems to be a guy that seems to know what he wants and what kind of a team he wants and how they're going to play the game. And you mentioned those 2 infield plays, getting the guys out at home plate. They had the one stinker. Okay, you lost Monday 15-6, 15, whatever the score was.
Right.
Okay, you made a bunch of mistakes. It happens. 162 games, you're going to have those. But I think other than that, again, I go back to the plate discipline, the quality of their bats.
Yeah.
The starting pitching, the bullpen's been a little shaky, but the starting pitching's been good. I mean, it's. I just feel like that when he was available, I wrote the column that said that the Tigers would be foolish not to hire him, and they did. 4 days later, they did.
Right. And
he clearly was the best option out there if you're going to look for a new manager. The timing was right. Gardy retired. Hinch was available, and say what you will about Al Avila. He made his move. Say what you will about Chris Ilitch. They gave him the money. And normally you don't pay a lot of money for managers, but there aren't too many guys like that. I think Hinch is known. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask, fellow GMs, list your top 5 managers, I would think he'd be in just about every GM's list in that top 5.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing the difference of a manager who's 20 years younger than Ron Gardenhire. I believe Hinch is in his mid-40s. And Gardenhire was 62, 63, something. He was retirement age, essentially.
Right.
And we talked about it last year where it looked like he was just tired. Obviously, especially battling, trying to run a team in the middle of a pandemic, and it all caught up with him. And he had health problems in the past. Now we have and obviously, even though Gardenhire talked a good game about how he was exposed to analytics and advanced metrics with Arizona, that one or two, he was a bench coach for like 1 year. Hinch is, rather than exposed to it and open to it, Hinch is, neck deep in it. Because that's how Houston ran their organization completely. It was very analytic oriented, and Hinch is using a lot of wants to bring a lot of that same. Let's not even go into the trash can banging stuff, but he wants to bring a lot of that philosophy he had with the Astros about how everything where analytics are very, very important, which is something we can't say about the Tigers until the last 4 or 5 years when they finally embraced it. So I think that was one of the pluses of having a younger manager who I think sees how baseball needs to be played. He's not an old school guy, for example. And remember, when you bring up the starting rotation, they're doing this without Spencer Turnbull, who was out with COVID, or at least at this point, they weren't really open as to why he was. When you're out this long, it's not contact tracing. You've gotten sick. And the same has happened with pitching coach Chris Shelton, who was like the hottest pitching coach pick hire this offseason because what he did with University of Michigan, taking their staff to the College World Series, and he's been out with COVID symptoms as well. So that's even more credit to Hinch that he's kind of holding things together when essentially your right hand man is out and you're essentially your ace. I mean, Turnbull, say what you will about Matthew Boyd. Turnbull is your quote-unquote ace on this team. He's a better pitcher. And they're doing this without these two in the dugout right now. And it's, so far, I would say this, I'm impressed with A.J. Hinch now that I get to watch him on an everyday basis. Before I knew what was going on with the Astros. I know they were playing such good baseball, but I wasn't watching. I didn't know how Hinch was on a day-to-day basis. And now that we're getting to see that, I've been impressed so far. I mean, obviously, there's going to be stretches where he's going to make the wrong decision, or he might make the right decision and it turns out badly. But I think he's putting the Tigers in a position, if not to win games, to at least be competitive. And I don't know if you could say that always about Ron Gardenhire.
Yeah, they made a lot of mistakes. Fundamentally, when Gardy was here, supposedly that was when he took the job, he said, hey, we're going to play the game the right way and all this other stuff.
And they didn't.
They didn't a lot of times.
Yeah.
Hinch also, and Avila said this at the press conference when they hired him, was that Avila said, I like that he has the analytic background, but he also has he goes also by his gut. He's kind of got a blend, So he says he's the kind of guy that can listen to an analytics guy and say you're wrong, and listen to a play it by the gut guy and say you're wrong. He's not going to be all one way or all the other, and he kind of does a nice blend of going by the feel. He also, and I wrote this in the column about Matthew Boyd, and is that when I referenced Hinch, is that Hinch seems to also appreciate those intangibles. Things like, when we was talking about Matthew Boyd, well, he's got something to prove. He has a presence in the clubhouse. He's a leader, and all these intangible kind of things, and along with the analytics.
Yeah, and speaking of Boyd is big time analytically minded as well. But it's like another thing I like what he's done so far is you have a Gold Glove caliber third baseman in Candelario. Don't make him play first base. And so they're plus he's a young player, and I think of a guy like that, especially coming off a really solid year last year, you put him in one position, you leave him there, and let him play. Knowing you're going to be in the lineup every day at that single position. I did not like last year moving Candelario back and forth between the corners, because at third base, he's got a his bat is good, but not first baseman good, if you know what I'm saying. At third base, different story. No, he's got his bat is more than good enough for third base, and when you factor in his glove, it's silly that last year he spent so much time at first base. I'm not a big fan of positions by committee, but I can understand considering a roster construction and you have that Miguel Cabrera anchor in it, that he's not going anywhere and you have to play him. I can understand then if we have Cabrera, let's make the best of it by shuffling him and these other players between first and DH and move them back and forth. Hopefully, playing first base a little bit more will keep Cabrera more engaged, but we won't play him there enough to where his health becomes an issue. And they do have some other players there who are capable of playing the position. They may not quite have the bat to do it, but at least for this year I can live with it. Like they're moving scope there. It looks like he might end up being the primary backup at first base, for example. And he's never played there before, but at least he's played the left side of the infield. So he's got some experience of what's going on over there. So, and another thing I do approve of, though, is so far he doesn't have a set closer. And that both Soto and Brian Garcia and God damn, I can't remember Soto's first name all of a sudden, that both have saves. And he seems to either going by hot hands and matchups and things like that. And again, I think that really, as you mentioned before, how he's using his late inning guys feels like a mixture of gut and analytics, which is good. I like that, for example. I've never been a fan of this guy gets the ninth inning and that's it. I don't like that.
I'm glad you said that because that was one of the other points that I meant to add to my thing about going by gut versus by the analytics. And you're right, the closer position. And Hinch said that almost from the day they arrived at spring training. So I'm not gonna be slave to one guy. I thought Soto on opening day pitched way too many pitches. It's almost 30.
Right.
In that ninth inning. But he's got a couple of guys that Hinch thinks could be.
They got stuff, that's for sure.
Right.
They've shown flashes.
And they say so much of being a closer is the mental aspect of it and so forth. And, does he have the right mentality and what have you? But, Hinch, he won't be nailed down in terms of naming maybe a guy will emerge this year that he tends to go with.
And wasn't Soto's save? And wasn't Soto's save a 4-out save as well on opening day?
Yeah, it may have been.
I think it was a 4-out save, which is oh my God, you don't do that anymore.
Right. Somebody else got a 4. Was it either that or somebody else got a 4-out save as well?
Yeah, well, it's either him or Garcia. So.
Well, yeah.
But there has been a 4-out save. I know that for sure.
All I know is that on opening day, Soto threw way too many pitches in the ninth inning.
Yeah, it was a very Todd Jones-esque appearance. But he's, because he gave up that 2-run home run, but he still got out of it, got the save, and everything. Everybody went home happy. What do you think about using Michael Fulmer out of the bullpen? Because that might be, in the end, that might be the best place for him, just because he can cut loose for 1, 2, 3 innings.
Right.
And I think, considering his health issues in the knee and the shoulder. I'm more, there's nothing wrong with having an Andrew Miller type in the middle of your bullpen, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
There's no without a doubt that Fulmer is talented enough to be a starting pitcher. We saw that the first couple years of his career. The problem is he capable of holding up to 180 to 220 innings? And I think the answer to that might be no.
Right.
So if that's what you're thinking, then make him as your set. You bring him in the 6. You might get 2 innings out of him. Might get an inning out. Use him by matchups. But he's a guy that that, especially if the rules were a pitcher has to face 3 batters now. Great, bring him in. Have him face 9. Have him face 6. It might be the best use for Michael Fulmer. Obviously they say starters are a more valuable commodity. But oftentimes your best relievers are failed starters, and they're failed starters for numerous reasons, being they're 1 or 2 pitch pitchers, or it's because of health reasons, or or they have a funky delivery, things like that. And with Fulmer, maybe in the long run, that's going to be the best spot for him. I'm sure Fulmer would much prefer to be a starter, but he looks much more effective right now coming out of the bullpen. Or maybe use him out of the bullpen for a year or two, and then he segues back into the rotation, moves back and forth like a Dennis Eckersley or John Smoltz. Not that I'm comparing them talent-wise, but at least situation-wise.
Right. No, I tend to agree with you. I don't know. The Tigers really don't need him in the rotation right now, as crazy as that may sound. Not because the rotation is so good, but just because they've got guys that they feel like are the rotation. I mean, the rotation is set. Obviously guys can drop out, and if they don't perform, there's a couple of guys that might, if we don't know if they'll stay there the whole year. But right now they don't need him, Fulmer, in the rotation. It might be better for him to be able to pitch twice a week, even 3 times a week, depending on how you use him, out of the bullpen, at 20 to 30 to 40 pitches per outing, than have him go once for 60 or 70 pitches. And I think this is a new thing for him. I hope he embraces it. I think that he could be very valuable to the Tigers in that role. It's so funny about bullpen and starter. So many pitchers, Al, as you know, some of them are they like one over the other without any question. And the bullpen guys, it's funny because the thing that the starters don't like about the bullpen are the very things that the bullpen guys like about being in the bullpen. Yeah. Starters say, well, I don't like going to the ballpark, not knowing if I'm going to be pitching, if I'm going to pitch that day. Yeah. And the bullpen guys say that's what they like about being in the bullpen. I like going to the ballpark and not knowing if I'm going to be used that day. I want to be able to be ready if the manager needs me, kind of a deal. There's that adrenaline of coming into a game, oftentimes in the middle of an inning, in a high leverage situation when there's men on base. You're not always coming into the game with a clean slate as a reliever. Sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. And then some relievers say, I don't like, the other thing the starters say is I need 40, 50 pitches to get into it, but you can't do that when you're a reliever. And relievers will say, I don't like only pitching once every 5 days. I like being able to be used more often than that. So it's so funny how some guys just embrace that role out of the bullpen and some don't. Now, guys like Fulmer, though, who are trying to kind of resurrect their career, if you will, it's the whole thing about beggars can't be choosers. I think he's probably just happy to be on a big league roster right now. And how A.J. Hinch chooses to use him, and sometimes, Al, these long relief guys, those longer stints, can kind of get unfairly portrayed as being garbage time or being, mop-up duty. They used to call it mop-up duty. Yeah. But that's not really the case anymore. I mean, nowadays, with starters only going 4 or 5 innings, that's not unusual. Then those guys that pitch those middle innings, those 2 or 3 innings sometimes at a time, that's not mop-up duty. That's not garbage time. And that can be the time where the game is won or lost right there in those middle innings. So I don't think there's any such thing really as mop-up duty anymore like they used to be. Right. These long relief guys are very valuable, more valuable than ever before, because the starters just aren't going. The starters aren't anymore are lucky to go 5 innings. Yeah.
Give me if it works out to where Fulmer becomes an ace middle relief guy, a guy who can get who can come in a 4th, 5th, 6th inning and give you 2 or 3 innings. Right. I think and do it a couple times a week or do it a few times. I think that's more valuable than a 4th or 5th starter. Who are essentially just innings eaters for the most part, unless it's like the 2013 Tigers or something. Right. But and it's so far I just brought up the stats. 2 appearances, 3 innings pitched. So he's had one game where he went 2 innings, and his WHIP is under 1. And this is a guy whose WHIP was over 2 last year. Right. So again, small sample sizes, but Yeah, and you made a good point about him just happy to be here, because there was talk in spring training when he was getting shelled at times that maybe maybe he would go to the alternate site, and pitch himself, and hopefully pitch himself to the majors. And with Turnbull, I think with Turnbull getting sick, that kind of changed the dynamics of the staff, and obviously it opened up the rotation to Casey Mize, and I think it also opened up, by domino effect, that essentially cemented Fulmer going north in the bullpen. So in the long run, once maybe the Tigers stumbled onto something with a little bit of luck, so to speak. No, I mean I don't. I'm not saying Turnbull getting sick was a good thing, but it's like maybe they're making the best of they've made the best of a bad situation. Because Mize, in his first start, he was decent. I'll put it that way. When he went 4 innings, only gave up 1 or 2 runs. Looked really good for 3 innings, and then I don't know if he ran out of gas. It seems like after a time his command seemed to leave him, and that's what happened in his first start. And for that matter, Taylor Skubal, I'm starting to get I hate to say this, but Skubal is looking like the better prospect right now, or at least the more advanced pitcher. Now, long term, both of these guys are supposed to be top of the rotation types, but obviously Skubal was a much lower draft pick because of his health issues. He had Tommy John surgery when he was in college, and he went to a small school. I think it was Seattle University. Bob Casey Mize was a big-time pitcher in a big-time college conference, the SEC. So they had different, one's a small school pitcher who was hurt. Then you have Casey Mize, who made waves in the College World Series and things like that. So he had Mize had the better history, so to speak, or he had the resume compared to Skubal. But Skubal looks like he has better stuff.
Yeah, Skubal is he? I think he's a 20. I want to say he's a 24th ranked prospect in the big leagues. Is Mize is above that?
Yeah, Mize is top 5.
Okay, so on paper, Mize is the better prospect, but I Skubal again. It seems like another kid that's got his head screwed on straight. I saw him talk after his start, even though they lost. He pitched well. Mm-hmm. He didn't get shelled. Mize, it's way too early to
it's too early for make any kind of determination. But Skubal has been, even going back to last year, Skubal's been more impressive.
Right. And Skubal is probably his motion is a lot less herky-jerky than Mize. Has still got that. He's got the Michael Fulmer thing to him. Yeah, so it's very violent. Well, so is Turan as far as that goes. Mm-hmm. But it's just very violent, and I always I don't know why. Maybe I make too much about that. Maybe that's just me being too old school. That a guy who's that herky-jerky. But it seems to be that those kinds of guys versus the more easy thrower, the guys with the easier windups, seem to not have as much trouble than the guys who have all these moving parts. And it seems like Mize has got a lot of moving parts to his body, not even necessarily his arm, but his body. Mm-hmm. And Skubal doesn't have that, but we'll see.
Yeah. It's at least it's the signs are encouraging. They both did look better than they did most of last year, where they both really struggled at times. But again, it's early, and neither one of these guys are going to get a ton of innings. I would not be surprised, especially when Turnbull gets healthy, that the Tigers go to a 6-man rotation just to keep innings down on a lot of these guys. And again, having guys like Norris and Fulmer in the pen who can go multiple innings. I mean, that's where it makes kind of sense to go to keep the because obviously Skubal and Mize are not going to throw 200 innings. If they go 150, I think they're probably pushing it. So, I would not be surprised if we see a 6-man rotation and we see Fulmer and Norris stay in the bullpen as the, kind of like how Norris was used last year. How Fulmer would only pitch 3 innings, and then you'd see Norris come in and pitch 3 or 4. So, maybe we'll see Fulmer kind of slotted into that as well when it comes to the young pitchers because, unless they're absolutely lights out, I don't see either Skubal or Mize ever going more than 6 innings. And right now their command doesn't justify it either.
Right.
But
Skubal's left-handed, which doesn't hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Because who knows what if a lefty? We're all a little crazy. But then again, that also makes Skubal more valuable as well. Right. I mean, you could make that argument that he could be a more valuable pitcher just because he's a left-hander, which is left-handers. What does they say? Make sure all your babies should be left-handed because a left-handed pitcher can have he'll get chance after chance after chance in the big leagues. So,
and did you notice that Skubal wears number 29, and who was another famous Tiger lefty who wore number 29, Mr. Mickey Lolich?
Yeah, that's right.
We'll see.
Yeah, why isn't Lolich's number retired? But that's another whole conversation to have.
Right.
Or at least, why is it even in circulation? We could have a whole discussion about that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but wasn't it nice to kind of talk positive about the Tigers?
Sure.
It's been a long time. I mean, last year, because we didn't, I think what really did change, it's much like with the Pistons, is that I can put up with a lot if I can see young players starting to make impressions and advancing, and you can start to kind of see the improvement and how things could move forward. We'll definitely see that with the Pistons. And I think we're kind of finally starting to see it with the Tigers, specifically with the pitching staff, and maybe to get lucky with Baddoo and and Candelario and a few of the other guys. And obviously we got Torkelson and Green and a few other position players in the minors right now that are hopefully going to pan out in the next couple of years. But and Willie Castro, another guy that we haven't really brought up, who has been handed a shortstop job because he can hit, and we just don't know if he can field well enough to keep him at shortstop. But again, another young player who's actually here, and they're saying, position's yours, earn it, now keep it. Do what you can to keep it. We're going to give you, the job is yours. Now it's up to you to keep the job. And I think it's also refreshing that they finally moved on from some players like Christian Stewart,
right?
Who was DFA'd.
Yes.
I think say what you will about 500 about small sample sizes. When you have over 500 big league at bats, that's no longer a small sample size. And
right.
When it came to a Christian Stewart, and it said volumes that he didn't get picked up off waivers when they DFA'd him. So he's back he's going to end up at AAA, which I'm not too. I don't know if I'd be thrilled with that because there's players I'd rather see getting playing time over a Christian Stewart, who I think has pretty much proven he's a 4A player. Because he needs to hit home runs because that's all. That his power was his calling card because he never fielded well enough, and he didn't hit for average. No, he doesn't walk. Right. So if he's not hitting home runs, he's it's not going to keep him in the bigs. And great, he hit home runs in AAA, but you can't do it in the big leagues. I'd rather see other guys get that playing time. But at least the Tigers, I think, have reached a point in the rebuild where they're not trying to sell us a bill of goods on certain players, because they were selling us hard on Christian Stewart for 2-3 years there, because he was the minor league player of the year for like 2 years in a row. Yet, he never came across as an elite prospect.
Right. And I'm as you're talking, I'm thinking about whether or not he's the kind of guy that will catch on with another team, or have they you mentioned the 500 bats, or have enough scouts and other big league front offices seen enough of him to know that it's maybe not going to happen. Now, somebody may take a flyer on him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying his career is over necessarily, but I, for a guy who's of that age, it's kind of funny to say time might be running out, but I wonder, unless he's one of these guys who could be a reclamation project with another organization, sometimes that helps. You go to a different organization, you get away from all the negativity that's maybe surrounding your previous organization, which is
like a J.D. Martinez kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not to blame the other organization, which is the Tigers. But the Tigers, gave him his opportunity. It didn't pan out.
Right.
But on the other hand, you mentioned the minor league player of the year. He's obviously talented enough, but sometimes, like you've said this before. You've used the term 4A.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just that ceiling that he has is just he's a really good minor league player, and just is not a very good big. And there's such a big difference, as you know, between even AAA and in the big leagues in terms of everything. I mean, how hard the game is, and everything is just so much more difficult at the big league level. So maybe it's just one of those guys that just ends up being a really good minor league player that just never could hack it.
And that's the thing, because I hear fans using this, I think, too often. Well, he's a young player. He's still a prospect. Christian Stewart's 27 years old.
Yeah,
I hear the same with Jacoby Jones. He's 29.
Wow, is he really? Wow.
I believe he's 29. At that point, you aren't a prospect. For every J.D. Martinez, there's 50 Christian Stewarts, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
And you are what you are when you get to a certain point, I think, in the big leagues, or at least, especially if you get to a certain age. And I'm looking at Jacoby Jones was born in is 28. He will be let's see, what's his birthday here? Yeah, he will be 29 in May. So he's not a prospect anymore. Jacoby Jones is what he is. There's no he's. I can see why the Tigers are riding with a guy like Jacoby Jones right now, because there are stretches where Jones looks like, he's a 5-tool guy.
Yeah.
We saw it for a month last year, like a month, 6 weeks last year, where he's
right.
He was hitting like Baddoo, essentially.
Right.
And then the wheels came off over the last 6 weeks of the season, and he went from a 1,000 OPS guy to a 500 OPS guy. But that's been his MO for his entire career. He's been so streaky. It's just that when he's bad, he's really, really bad. Right. And that's the issue of some of these guys. When they're good, they're good. That's awesome. But the good players are able to minimize the tough times. They're going to struggle, but they still find other ways to contribute, either by taking walks or still be able to hit a home run or three. That's the difference, I think, between, say, a Jonathan Scoop, for example, who has proven to be a legit big league player with 20 home run power and is able to minimize his issues and maximize the positives, compared to someone like Jacoby Jones. It was like riding a roller coaster when it comes to watching him play all through the year. Where do you give me the guy who's more like just going on low rolling hills rather than going up and down mountains? And that's what it feels like someone like Jacoby Jones is.
Yeah, but the thing that I think kind of keeps Jones around, you mentioned, when he's bad, he's really bad.
Yeah.
His one thing that he does that, they always say it's a cliche that defense never goes into slumps.
Yeah.
And Jones knows how to play center field. I mean, that is not an easy position to play.
He is their best center fielder. That's no question
about that. When you're in Detroit, especially when you're in that ballpark, he makes some of these plays look easy. Some of these balls are hit way, way deep in those deep recesses of left and right center. He always takes a good route. He's very fluid out there. He seems to get to these balls with Austin Jackson like ease.
Yeah.
And so that's, if you can do that on a consistent level, even if it just keeps you on the roster as a defensive, but nobody ever really keeps pure defensive guys on the roster anymore. I understand that, but if you can handle, you can't just put anybody out there in center field at Comerica Park. I mean, you have to have a special type of and the longer he's played that position in Detroit, gets used to the ballpark, that is a ginormous outfield, as you know, and he seems to be able to handle it from left to right. If you were to graph it out, it'd be like this.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of range, and he gets to balls really, really efficiently.
Right.
And so he's got that nailed down. That's never gone away.
Right.
But it's the hitting, like you said.
Yeah. I just brought up his numbers. In July last year, his OPS was 1.3.
Yeah.
And then in August it was 0.6.
Right.
And that's essentially his career in a nutshell. Yeah. Super, super highs and super low lows. And if he could mitigate those, and give, have a 900 OPS and then a 700 OPS, that's, then you get yourself a far more productive ball player, because he's not an automatic out for a month at a time. And that's unfortunately what a guy like Jones is going to be. But even still, it's nice, remember the old line, the line from MASH where Frank Burns says it's nice to be nice to the nice. Well, it's nice to be nice talking about the Tigers. It feels like it's been quite a while since we've had a fully positive conversation about this team. And I'm sure there's going to be times during the season where we're going to have our complaints, but it's not, after a decent spring training and off to a 500 start to the season, and we're starting to see upside in some of these players. It's the first time in a long time I'm starting to feel at least a little encouraged by the Tigers.
Well,
it's been a while.
Go back to Jones real quick. We were talking about defense keeping him on the roster. Yeah. And keeping in mind this, even though he's going to be 29 this year or next year, this year. Yeah. His spring training, I'm looking at his spring training numbers, he was 5 for 44.
Yeah.
Which is a 114 batting average, 204 on base, 273 slugging, 477 OPS, but yet he made the team. Why? Well, he's got some cash because he's been here for a while. But the defense, I don't know if a guy goes 5 for 44 in spring training who has not really established himself in the big leagues like Jones hasn't. But if he doesn't have a glove, I don't know that he makes a team out of spring training. I mean, I don't know. I get the feeling that his glove kept him on the roster based on those spring training numbers.
Oh, I think you're definitely right, because you want to see Victor Reyes in center field for 130 games? No, I don't think any. So. Yeah, or any that's or we'll see Nico Goodrum or something. God forbid we don't. It's not. Nico Goodrum's a solid defensive ball player, but he's not a center fielder. And neither. Reyes is out there today, but you don't want him being your everyday guy. Right. There's a reason why he's considered a fourth outfielder. So, but okay, I guess we might. Oh, there's one other thing before we move on to the question 2 of the birthday game in the Detroit Lions. We need to at least touch on what's going on of Major League Baseball in politics, in that Major League Baseball has moved the All-Star game from Atlanta to Denver in response to the Georgia State Legislature enacting laws designed to suppress voters, specifically voters in Democratic areas, specifically the black vote, if you look into this. And thus, Major League Baseball elected to move the All-Star game, and they did select Colorado, which has... people are trying to say, it's a lot like Georgia. No, it's not, because everybody gets mailed a ballot in Colorado, much like we did here in Michigan this year. And they have they don't limit access to drop boxes, and in Georgia, the legislature is now giving themselves the power to remove people who are in charge of votes. It's a long. I don't want to go deep dive into the actual law, but if you look into it, if you only start scratching the surface, you can see exactly what's going on here. And obviously, it has some people very upset, and a lot of other people saying, "Thank you, MLB." But you know what my first thought was why MLB did this? I don't think it's politics. I think they did not want to have players boycotting the game, and I think they didn't. They just wanted to. We'll take the hit now. We see what's going on here. This is not going to be a good thing if we keep the game in Atlanta. It's going to be a huge shit show come July. Let's just take the bullet now, and then we'll just get out of here. And by the time July rolls around, it won't be nearly the story, and we'll be able to wash our hands of the whole thing. If you know what I'm saying, this is Major League Baseball saying, we don't want to deal with this. We're just going to get the hell out of Dodge. It's much like when the NFL pulled the '93 Super Bowl out of Arizona for not wanting to recognize MLK Day, or the NBA pulling the All-Star game out of North Carolina in 2017 over anti-transgender legislation, the infamous bathroom bill. So I think it's great. I think it's the right thing to do. It's not just Major League Baseball. Coca-Cola has stepped up in this. So has Delta Airlines and several other corporations. Corporations here that are, the corporations are not bastions of liberalism. They're profit-driven organizations, and that's very conservative-type values, yet they are saying, you're kind of overstepping your bounds here. This is pretty obvious. This is not good. And these companies see which way the winds are blowing. So I say it's more power to MLB. I don't care, if the reasons they probably did it are not exactly altruistic,
right?
They still made the right decision, if you know what I'm saying.
I think so. I mean, I think too many people are making this all strictly about the voter ID thing. It's not. It's a lot. If anybody
there's a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. If anybody cares to take some time to actually read what they're doing in Georgia, it's not just about showing an ID. And of course, a lot of people on the right are focusing only on the ID portion of it. But it's a lot more than that that they're doing in Georgia. A lot more than that, and which is very troublesome. Sometimes I feel sorry for these leagues because I know they don't want to be political. Nobody, it's like any other corporation. Yeah. No corporation wants to be political. I mean, there's really nobody out there but sometimes you get dragged into things, or sometimes you just have no choice but to do certain things. And, you don't want to show your hand too much because you don't want to alienate a segment of your customer base right away. Right. But, let's face it, this is not, Major League Baseball. The four sports are not just any other corporation in America. They're a lot different. They're a lot more riding on their reputations and so forth. So, if not them, then who? I guess would make these kinds of stands. And like you said, you're no matter what you do, you're going to tick off a bunch of people. So you may as well do what you feel is the right thing. And whether it's altruistic or whether it's no matter what's guiding that decision, at least they did, I think, make the right decision. I know that it sucks for a lot of people in Atlanta who did not want. It's kind of ironic when you think about it, because Atlanta, of course, is a predominantly black area, and they were the ones that essentially, would be affected by this financially, and they're not the ones that are writing these laws. Nope. But unfortunately, it is still in the state of Georgia where this is all going on. So I know it's not going to be received well. It already is not being received well. Yeah. But what makes me frustrated, Al, is the dwelling on the whole voter ID aspect of this whole thing, and it's way, way, way more than that.
Yeah, and just for the voter ID, just to throw that out there, in Colorado, they said, well, you got to show voter ID in Colorado. In Colorado, you can use a student ID, you can use a utility bill, you can use a bank statement. There are numerous types of ID they honor. In this bill, it's the driver's license / state ID thing, and except there's a lot more involved in this bill than just voter ID, but it's. It's pretty obvious, and let alone, let's not even get into the reasoning behind this is a fallacy to begin with over stolen elections and voter fraud, which was non-existent, and yet they're still playing that same card. And the Braves don't get a lot of sympathy from me because they're playing the victim card here, even though I'm sure everybody in the Braves, or at least the higher ups in the Braves organization, are all voted Republican. And there's also the fact that they're trying now. Well, this is going to cost the economy $100 million. Okay, what proof do you have of that? Well, that's what bothers me when people say, "Oh, this is going to bring this much to the economy," or "It's going to cost this much to the economy." Yet they don't show any kind of reasoning behind it. I think they're just pull these numbers out of their asses. And the other thing about this is now we're seeing the backlash to the backlash. We're seeing some Republicans. Well, I'm not drinking Coke anymore. Okay, I'm sure you burned your Nikes and smashed your Keurig while you were at it, and also there's some GOP Congress critters are now making noise about moving Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption. And you know what I say? Yes, do that. That is textbook. They want to punish Major League Baseball by getting rid of their antitrust, the antitrust exemption. That is the right damn thing to do. There is no reason why baseball has an antitrust exemption at this point of its life. No, that's textbook doing the right thing for the wrong reason. And hey, if you want to get rid of the antitrust exemption, go for it. Don't even get me going on like the on like isn't the NCAA or the NFL supposed to be a nonprofit, for example? Shit like that. No, it's bullshit. This is, if the GOP wants to punish Major League Baseball by removing the antitrust legislation, hell, that's the first time I'll ever agree with a GOP guy in a long time. Let's just do it. Yeah. But it's. And there's one other thing to keep in mind here. This happens. Major League Baseball brings the All-Star Game to Atlanta, which actually is in the suburbs of Atlanta. Don't get me going on how the Braves had a really nice stadium in downtown Atlanta that was only 20 years old, and they built a new one out in the suburbs. So we've got to remember that as well. How they soak the taxpayers for that. Is that Major League Baseball plays up Jackie Robinson Day every year. And for that matter, you have the recent death of Hank Aaron, which I'm sure would have come up, during All-Star festivities. Both those men were civil rights icons, and I don't think either one of those guys would have approved what's going on in the Georgia legislature right now. So, Major League Baseball is, they don't want to turn a raging fire into a freaking inferno, so they're just going to get out of Dodge, and I don't blame them one bit. I mean, I am no fan of Major League Baseball is run, but even these entities make the right decision, and I got to give them credit for that.
Yep.
All right, with that, what's question 2 of the birthday game?
All right. Gosh, I almost forgot. This is for the I hosted the Knee Jerks for 12 years, and all I got was a stupid T-shirt.
Yeah.
Born in 1954, football skill player in the NFC East, not with the Eagles. We've already determined that.
Right.
He is in both in the College Football and Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he finished his last year with the Denver Broncos.
Is it Tony Dorsett?
It is.
Not Dorset, Dorsett, if I remember right.
Yes. Dorsett.
Yes.
Yes. Pitt, of course. Yep. We all remember him at Pitt. And then all those years with the Cowboys and finished up with Denver. And he is, believe it or not, 67 years old today.
Oh, my God. We're getting old. Tony Dorsett is 67? I can still see that 99-yard run he had in my memory.
I can still hear Don Meredith, 99 yards and a half.
Yeah.
If Dorsett was still on the 40-yard line, and Meredith was already calling the touchdown.
Back when Monday Night Football was must-see TV, when it actually was fun. Well, then again, what else was there to watch? And when back there were still only 3 networks back then. Right. But yeah, we all were watching Monday Night Football back then, and I still remember that 99.5-yard run like it was yesterday. So yes, I'll be looking in the mail for my T-shirt.
Okay, good.
2XL tall. All right, let's talk a little Lions before we start to hit the home stretch here. So far in free agency, Greg, they have not made very many, since we last talked about a month ago. They've only been making fairly minor free agent moves. And it's interesting that pretty much every major free agent they had, they let walk. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., Matt Prater, Jamal Agnew, Jared Davis, and also the trade of Matthew Stafford. They've all moved on. The only person they felt the need to resign and made an effort to do so was defensive end Romeo Okwara, who got a 3-year, $37 million deal. 25 is guaranteed, and he obviously to get a player of his caliber, at least coming off the year he had, where he was a top 10 sack guy. I think he gave him a bit of a hometown discount so he can play with his brother next year. Not that making $10 million a year plus is chump change, but I think if you try to replace him in free agency, you're going to pay more than that. So I have no complaints with that deal with him. And honestly, every other free agent move they'd made, except for one, has been short-term stopgaps. And the only person so far, I think, who's gotten a multi-year deal is running back Jamal Williams, who got 2 years, 7.5. Not huge money, and he is essentially already been slotted in as the essentially the number 2 running back. Essentially doing the same thing he did to very good success in Green Bay. And everybody in Green Bay hated to see Williams go, but I think it was more of a financial thing. And Williams is a very productive running back. I think he'll slot right into their backfield nicely, so I have no complaints with that either. But it's interesting that all of the big name free agents, Greg, they made absolutely next to no effort to keep any of these guys. And be honest with you, I think the only there's Galladay and Prater are the only ones that I think they might really, really miss. Because Jones was not coming back. He was over 30, and he wants to play for a contender. Agnew, one-trick pony, return guy. And he got stupid money to go to Jacksonville. He really did. Jared Davis never lived up to the draft pick status. And even though they'll miss Galladay, I don't know if he's worth $17-18 million a year. But I am a little concerned about the place kicking now, because ever since we were young pups, Greg, the Lions have always, as bad as they were, they've almost always had elite kickers. Going back to Eddie Murray, and then how come Jason Anson, and now Matt Prater? They had that one little sideways year with Akers. So, but yeah, for the last almost 40 years, the Lions have had elite kicking. So I'm a little nervous about that, because I know they picked up Cincinnati's kicker in free agency, another cheap one-year deal. But at least you can see what the Lions are doing here. They're just, right now, I think they're just trying to clean up the contract and salary cap mess that was left by the previous regime. That's essentially all they're doing this year.
But isn't it kind of refreshing? Mm-hmm. They're not going out and they're not, making a big splash, bringing in these big names, spending this big money for these guys.
Or taking a big money flyer on guys like James and Vitae.
Well, that and just going out and getting, trying to build their team with free agency. And it seems to be, they seem to be kind of fortifying using free agency as you should to patch some holes, but not. I know it's early in the regime, but it doesn't seem to be. I like the fact that there wasn't a big splash, and maybe that's partly because the class wasn't that good. I don't know, or they didn't feel like there was going to be out there that they would make a big splash with, but. It's refreshing. I mean, because the Lions for so many years, and you mentioned the overpaying on some guys. You mentioned a couple names right off the top there. It's. I've never been that. Every time the Lions have gone out and done that and signed a big name guy, it doesn't seem to really excite me, because so many times they've done that it hasn't really made a difference in the win-loss record. Mm-hmm. And it seems like other teams use free agency as an adjunct to good drafting. Mm-hmm. And it seems like the Lions did it opposite. They were trying to use the draft as an adjunct to the free agent signings, and that's not the way it works. Typically, it's not the way it works in the NFL. You build with your draft, and you use the free agency as the adjunct, and it seems like they were doing it the other way around. And so it's kind of nice that they didn't do anything crazy, and they got some guys on short-term one-year deals and so forth. And Dan Campbell and company seem to feel like the guys that they did sign genuinely really wanted to be with the Lions. And so I mean, it seems like the Campbell regime knows what kind of player they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And if that kind of a player isn't available, if a player is out there that's available, that's not the kind of player that they want, they're not going to sign him because he's not the guy that they want. I kind of like that. It seems that the Lions were always bidding against themselves to get guys that nobody else seemed to really were all that excited about. And it seems like the Lions now are taking a different approach, which is, if we really like the guy, we'll bring him in. If we don't, we won't. And it seems like the Lions were kind of like grasping at straw. I know that's maybe I'm not giving the other regimes enough credit, but it just seemed like that's what was going on. And right now, there's, again, like I mentioned with A.J. Hinch, knowing what kind of team he wants, it seems like the Lions with Holmes and with Campbell seem to have a vision right off the get-go, what kind of guy they want, what kind of team they want to be, even before they even have their first draft. So I think it's refreshing. That didn't seem to come out with the previous regime. Or even regime beyond that. Even it just seemed to always be, well, we'll take who we can get. We've got money to spend. We'll spend it, even if it means bidding against ourselves. And it never really ever panned out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the two players, I should say, that sums up the stupidity of the Quinn-Tricia era are Graham Glasgow and Vitae. Now, I can't pronounce Vitae's first name. Right. I just call him Vitae. And Graham Glasgow is exactly the kind of success story. He's grew up in Southeast Michigan, played at the University of Michigan, was a third-round draft pick. So he wasn't exactly the most highly heralded offensive lineman coming out, but he came in, started immediately. Never missed a snap until they started that stupid rotation thing for whatever reason. He wanted to stay, yet Quinn-Tricia decided, well, we don't want to spend money on guards. So, and he didn't, I think he ended up getting like $10 million a year with Denver, where he hasn't missed a snap for Denver, playing very well for them, and to replace them, they figured, well, we'll sign Vitae and we'll plug the guard, we'll draft a guard, and they ended up drafting two guards in the third and fourth round, which was dumb. And then they figured, okay, we'll have Vitae, we'll put him at tackle, and then it turns out Vitae, who was only was a swing tackle, he was essentially the Eagles' backup for his entire career, playing both positions. Between bad play and being unable to stay healthy, they had to actually plug, so the right tackle ended up sucking all year. And now this regime, now that they see Vitae, they're thinking, we'd probably be best use putting him at guard because he's got a guard's build, he's got guard skills. So essentially now the Lions are paying more than Graham Glasgow to Vitae, and Vitae's going to be probably playing the same position this coming season. That's just how ridiculous some of the moves the previous regime made. And and a lot of it is that stupid ultimatum where you need to compete next year, which led to some very short-term moves, which the team is now paying for, and that's going to lead me into the draft, how things are shaking out there. But at least so far, I think it's that Campbell and Holmes seem to have a philosophy, and they seem to know the kind of player they want, but they also don't seem to be so tightly pigeonholed into the type of player like Matt Patricia was. Matt Patricia, you had to be such a narrow niche to fit into his scheme. It's like you could play for two teams in the league. That would be Detroit and New England, and that's ridiculous. If you're such a good, smart, defensive guru, you think you'd be able to scheme with the players you have and maybe make changes, and tweak and change and scheme. Yet, no. The previous regime said we have to. This is how we're going to play it, and this is the type of player we need. And if that is so, we're going to reach, and that's how you end up with Giovanni Tavai as a second-round pick, and who shouldn't even been on the field last year. So, who knows how this will all work out, Greg? But once again, at least I'm encouraged by what this front office is doing. By what you're saying, they're not trying to fix things in one offseason when you just can't do it. It would be impossible to do, considering the state of the roster and the state of the salary cap.
Yeah, getting back to your thing real quick about kicking with Prater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please do.
I think that was just a matter of Prater having the worst year of his recent career.
And it was an okay year. It was a bad year for Matt Prater.
For him. And that happened at the worst time for him.
And a contract year, yeah.
Contract year, and he's not getting any younger, although I know kickers can kick into their 40s. I understand that.
Yeah.
But, it just raised some eyebrows, and I would have liked to have seen the Lions bring him back because I still think he's a good kicker, especially from long range.
Right.
He seemed to have more trouble with extra points than he did long field goals for whatever.
And that's the thing. The guy they picked up from Cincinnati, I don't have his name handy right now. He's not known as a long distance kicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does not have nearly the same leg.
Yeah, when those drives stall at the 35-yard line or so, which they so often do, then, you bring in a guy, you like to bring in a guy who can kick a 52, 53-yarder, provided the conditions are okay, with some reasonable amount of and I know that
he was clutch. I know clutch is not exactly a fungible thing, but he's I don't know what clutch is, but I know when I see it, and Prater was clutch.
Right. Yeah. And he could have bad games other than that clutch kick. But he would make that kick, and he did it a couple times last year where he kicked won games with no time on the clock. Yeah, I mean you're right. That is a big part. We talked about closers and having that certain mentality, and there's definitely a mentality when it comes to wanting to be the guy that they call on. Hoping the drive stalls almost. Yeah. So you do have to go out there and kick a long field goal to win the game. You're right. He did excel at that, and he seemed to have problems with those 33, 34-yard extra points for whatever reason. But when those drives stall at the 35-yard line, you're going to want to bring in a guy that has a reasonable chance of making a 52, 53-yarder, because those 3 points can be very valuable later on instead of having to punt the ball away. Right. And oftentimes it ends up being a touchback anyway. So you're only getting a net of 15 yards on the punt anyway. So it was kind of sad that they did. He ended up signing with the Cardinals, Prater did. Yeah, right. I think for a couple of years too, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, because we really have been spoiled when it comes to both kickers and punters for the most part as well. And that, the Lions have always seen, I guess you could just say special teams. No, the Lions have had say what you will about how bad the organization's been, and I think it came out, someone put all the numbers together this week, and the Lions have the worst winning percentage of all teams in the 16-game era. Even worse than the Cleveland Browns, when you factor in overall. And, at the very least, you can always say, well, the Lions have good special teams. Because, going back to how long they've always had good kickers. Remember Mel Gray, or they had Desmond Howard, and obviously, they've had some good to great kick returners and some very good punters and some great kickers, and that there was always that at least with special teams, you didn't have to worry so much. But I mean, we go back to Earl Mann as the team's kicker. Back he was a straight ahead guy, and if I remember right, I don't think he was all that good, but I don't think any kickers were all that. At least the straight ahead guys, none of them were all that good back then. So, which is funny because I did some kicking in junior high and high school, at least specifically in junior high. I was our kicker in junior high, and I was a straight ahead guy. Right. And I was good from about 25. After that, it got a little dicey. So
you had to get it. You had to get into the red zone to get in your range, right?
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness! All right, and enough about my football history there. What are your thoughts in the 17-game season? Actually, before you even get to that, real quick, draft rumors. Got to at least touch on that. Draft rumors are bound because there's been a lot of trades, Greg. QB trades, teams moving up and down in the draft. The Dolphins moved down, then they moved back up. The Jets traded Sam Darnold, for a draft pick. Not nearly the haul the Lions got, but they got a bunch of draft picks. So I was like, they're going to take a quarterback high in the draft. And here we are, the Lions are at 7, but unlike Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, there seems to be no true consensus as to what the Lions are going to do. Remember last year, we heard, there was 2 supposed franchise quarterbacks who were going to be there when the Lions picked, and all we heard from the Lions was Matt Stafford's a quarterback, so that means, well, no one needed to trade. So if you wanted to get a quarterback, you just had to get number 4. You didn't have to get to number 3. So the Lions were pretty much stuck taking a quarterback, doing what they did. So it seems like this team, this current organization. We've even said, they've had the insiders. We've seen the tweets and the articles from the talking heads in the NFL saying the Lions are saying they're not tied to Jared Goff. If we see a quarterback we like, we will draft him, which is what the Lions should have been saying last year. Right. Yeah. So who knows what they're going to do because they need a wide receiver. They need anybody on defense. We don't know if Goff is going to be the long-term solution at quarterback. And there might be an elite offensive tackle sitting there when they draft. So they have a lot of options. I guess it really comes down to, do they have the balls to take a quarterback if let's say if Fields or Lance falls down to them? That's the question, I think, right now. But I think that would be the best case scenario. If one of those guys is available, I'm sure we're taking phone calls. Or we may take them, but we're taking phone calls. So I just feel like they seem to be handling the pre-draft stuff a lot better than Bob Quinn did last year.
Huh. Yeah, that's for sure. And here's the other thing too, Al. I know we've said a lot of nice things about the Lions.
Yeah.
The first quarter of the year here. Mm-hmm. But just think about this for a second. Now, the Lions traded Matthew Stafford, who was 30, going to be 33, I think, this year.
Yep, going to be 33.
Okay, they got back a starting quarterback, Goff, and they got a second rounder this year, and 2 firsts the next 2 years after that.
Right.
The Jets, and we're going to spoiler alert, we're going to hear about the Jets from me a little bit later on.
Yeah.
The Jets traded Sam Darnold, who was the number 1 overall pick just 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And all they got from the Panthers were a 6th rounder this year and a 2nd and a 4th in subsequent years.
Right.
So I'm not sure there's something is to be said there, and I'm not sure if it's for Brad Holmes or if it's the Jets being the Jets. But how do you get that haul for Stafford, who's 33?
Yep.
And the Jets can only get this for a guy that was the number 1 draft choice overall 3 years ago. Now this says a couple of things. Number one, it says that Matthew Stafford is still very valued in the NFL. Number one, that's the first thing it says. And the second thing it says is that maybe Brad Holmes, I can't imagine how Bob Quinn would have messed up that Stafford trade. I don't think he could ever have gotten. So it's interesting that the Jets got what they got for Darnold, who I understand is not Matthew Stafford. I get it.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you that Stafford, for all the hate that he got in Detroit, still netted you 2 first-round draft picks and a second and a quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for a guy who hasn't won really anything in the NFL, that is quite a haul.
Yeah. Isn't it weird the Lions actually setting the market? That's still, I can't wrap my head around that.
I've never seen so many quarterbacks change teams, starting quarterbacks change teams like we've seen so far.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. And it's not done like Carolina has already told Teddy Bridgewater. They said, find yourself a trade, for example. Yeah. It's not done yet, and we're probably going to see more. I would not be surprised if we see more quarterbacks move right around draft day. So, yeah, it's this has been a very fascinating offseason. It really has. Which, adding to the fascination, we must talk about the 17-game season, which I think we're both not in favor of. But it's now, the NFL season is now 3 exhibition games, 1 bye week, 17 games total. Clubs will host 10 games altogether, either 9 regular season, 1 preseason, or 8 regular season and 2 preseason. This year, the Lions will be 8 regular season and 2 preseason, because how they worked out the extra game is teams will play 5 interconference games instead of 4. So, and obviously it's division versus division. With the Lions this year, they're going to be playing the end of the AFC West. So this year the AFC teams get the home game. Next year the NFC teams get the home game. And how it falls for the Lions is that they will end the season in Denver, as that will be the oddball game. There is so much wrong with this. First, there's no the 17-game season is a complete money grab. I mean, if you at least wanted to, at least pretend to care about player health, player safety.
Shortening the season instead of length.
Yeah, you would at the very least add another bye week, and you would expand the rosters. Do both of those, but that costs money, which they refuse to do. And so something's going to happen where some team is going to get absolutely boned because they got stuck playing a road game to end the season. It's going to cost and for that matter, the NFL is expecting full stadiums this fall. God forbid. We'll see how that goes. But this has someone's going to get bone written all over it, Greg. It really does.
And this, by the way, this whole idea that, well, it's still 20 games total. Instead of 16 regular season games and 4 preseason games, it's 17 and 3. It's not the same thing.
No, it's not.
Those exhibition games were, first of all, the starters never played. Even in that second to last exhibition game, which is supposed to be the dress rehearsal for the regular season, even then, you'd be lucky if you saw too many of the starters much beyond like the first series of the second half.
Right.
It's not the same thing. It is not even close to being the same thing. I don't understand it. I really don't. I mean, for the physical toll that these guys take, and now you mentioned money grab. What about your star play? What about guys that are going to go down because they're playing this extra game? I know to the small-minded people, it's going to seem like, well, it's still 20 games total. It's not the same thing. You mentioned, adding a second bye. That would have been, at least that would have been nice. I never really thought it would ever come to fruition. I really didn't. When they started talking about this a few years ago, whenever it was, I just said, well, yeah, it's some talk. They'll never go for that. They'll never do that. But here we are, and it's.
And this, I think, this really goes to show just how ineffectual the NFL Players Union is, because it's divided in that you have the big stars who are getting the big guaranteed money. And a lot of them are making more jack because of this. Because of I think Jared Goff's going to make an extra $1.5 million something this year because he's going to be guaranteed of a roster bonus because of the number of games that he'll end up playing. And then you got on the lower tier, you got the guys who are just hanging on, or making league minimums, or have very little guaranteed money in their contracts, and they just want to play. They're just trying to hang on to their jobs. They don't want to make waves. So that leads to a union that you have rich guys who don't want to screw up the status quo, and you have bottom guys who are afraid of making waves, and that leads to a very ineffectual players union. Could you see Major League Baseball's union putting up with this kind of, hey, look at the fight they had over trying to the owners trying to expand the playoffs. The owners and the players are like, you got to give us a hell of a lot more money if you're going to do that. And they're like, no, we'll give you the DH in both leagues. And the players are like, you're going to add 30 more jobs, and that's usually and usually the DH is not a really high paid player anyway. Yet you're going to rake in hundreds of millions of dollars with an extra playoff series. No, you need to do more than that. And obviously the owners balked, and that's because they have a strong union. If there's one league that desperately needs a strong players union, it's the NFL. They keep getting boned by the owners of stuff like this just being pushed through, and it's awful. There's no reason for 18 games. I mean, 16 games was nice and symmetrical between the size of the divisions, and the 8 and 8s, and how the divisions are broken. It just worked. Even though you could complain that 16 games is too much. Even still, they had found a nice level plateau where everybody seemed to be happy, but the owners, using the excuse of a pandemic, billionaires at that matter, we might have lost some profits last year. We got to make it up, so we're going to extend the season. Just to drive home a point about these teams, didn't the Ford family bought the Lions in 1961 for like $6 million? I think it was. Something that about
63, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
63.
63. They spent $6 million to buy the Lions. That team is now worth well over $1 billion. And would be worth even more if it had been run competently over the past 60 years. So, the owners can cry me a damn river, and don't even get me going how they don't open the books about saying, we lost money. Okay, Did you lose revenue? Did you lose profits? You were laying people off. When it comes to people like NFL owners, if their lips are moving, they're lying. They're not, or they're withholding information. And the 17-game season is just more of that, if you ask me.
Agreed.
All right. Since I got the question, I got the birthday game question 3. Let's do a quick. Something real quick here. How about the Red Wings, Greg? The tank continues. They are over 500 at home. I was surprised when I looked that stat up. But they are horrible on the road. They are, 9-8-4 at home and 4-14-4 on the road. And don't get me... I miss the old point system. I'll just say that much with these overtime points and crap. Right. But trade deadline is this Monday, 4/12. I guess the issue is, Greg, is that Steve Yzerman is kind of handcuffed because either you're going to be selling low if you decide to make a major move. I mean, a big, let's shake up the team move, and that would be probably trading Dylan Larkin or Anthony Mantha. You're kind of selling low in those guys. They're not having the best season. So the guys who do have value around the league, they don't have a lot of that they would want to trade, are probably guys like Luke Glendening and Bobby Ryan. And what are you going to get for them? Maybe a second round pick if you're talking to Ken Holland, who's had a man crush on Glendening for years. But you trade Bobby Ryan, what are you going to get? A third round pick? Maybe. That's why I'm not expecting anything exciting in this trade deadline.
It's about the future.
Yeah.
I mean,
about getting draft capital, but even still,
he basically acquired Ryan.
Yeah, to trade him.
The idea that that he would be traded, and then he might even. And
Ryan was fine with that, reportedly.
Right, and then he might even come back to the Red Wings, kind of like what they did with who's that guy that they signed? Oh God, that veteran guy a few years ago that they let him go and they signed him back again, let him go again. I'll have to look at the name up, but it's the same situation. I mean, Ryan is. You mentioned if you get a third round pick, that third round pick is probably going to be worth more to the organization in the long run than Bobby Ryan would in the short run.
Yeah,
the team's not going anywhere. Ryan's a good guy to have in the clubhouse, in the dressing room. He's kind of resurrecting his career.
Yeah, he's been pretty solid this year. Yeah,
he's had some off the ice trouble that he's trying to shed.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is it was both parties were fine with the arrangement. Mm-hmm. And if he goes,
he might not get traded. We don't know.
He might not get traded, but if Yzerman gets a third round draft pick for him, I think that's a pretty good trade off. Frankly, Ryan has done what he was essentially what he was hired to do. He has not been a bust. He's been a pretty good player for the Red Wings. Yeah. One of the most consistent scorers on a team that desperately needs any scoring that they can get.
Right.
So I mean, he's he's held up his share of the bargain. We'll see what Yzerman does, but it was kind of an arranged marriage, but that's okay. Sometimes that works.
Yeah. And
it seems to have worked with Ryan.
I guess the thing is, I'm just not expecting much on trade deadline day. I'm really not. I don't, because the Wings aren't going to trade any kind of future asset for anything, and they do, and the way they really don't have a lot of assets on this roster right now. I mean, for this, how much we talked about how the Lions roster was really screwed up, cap wise and just type of player wise, talent wise. I kind of getting the same feeling with the Red Wings right now. I mean, their best players, like Larkin and Mantha, I think on a good team are probably on our second line guys. As much as I'd like Dylan Larkin, I think he's a second line center. He is not a top guy. Mantha is so hot and cold. I really don't know what to make of him anymore. I mean, you could really make an argument the best player on this team is Bertuzzi, and he hasn't been able to play all year because of an undisclosed back injury. And there was, I think, an article in the paper this week saying, they would not be surprised if he doesn't even come back this year. So we don't know what's going on with him. So,
Thomas Vanek. Vanek was the guy.
Vanek, that's the guy. But yeah, there's the Wings are just, they feel like they're playing a little bit better than they did last year, but as a franchise, they still feel like they're floundering. But I can't blame Yzerman for that, because he's essentially was given, a deuce and a four in the hole, for his hole cards right now, and he's waiting for, he's got nothing to play right now. So, for all the talk of all the teams rebuilding right now, all of a sudden I get the feeling the Wings are by far the farthest away from turning things around.
It does kind of seem that way, but you can still make, you're still just they've still got some guys in the pipeline.
Yeah,
that
I might feel different if we see Mo Sider this year, for example.
they still don't have a really good goaltending prospect.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. They have nothing in the pipeline when it comes to goaltending.
I don't know what they're going to do once Bernier and,
And
Greisel and Pickard, become too old.
Oh, yeah, when Calvin Pickard is your top prospect, enough said.
Yeah, so they need help there. But there's still a lot of guys, Al, that are not with the Red Wings.
Yeah, they have two guys I saw this week. Raymond and Sider are like top 5 prospects overall in the league. Well, I think they had Sider like 3 and Raymond 5.
If you want to be a pessimist, of course, this is pre-Yzerman, of course.
Yeah.
But then you think of guys like Dennis Cholowski.
Yeah. And Rasmussen.
Never really got it going. And then
he picked a defenseman who can't play defense and essentially a power play specialist who really hasn't done anything in the power play. So, Ken Holland, for all the good he did, much like Joe Dumars, the last few years of his tenure sullied his reputation. It really did. Both are guys that hung on a little too long. Even though with Holland there was the mitigating factor of you had the supposedly the Ilitch is saying we need to keep the playoff streak going. We got to reach 25. Yay, they did. Now look where we're at. So when you could make the argument that for the Red Wings the rebuild should have started in 2010, but here we are. Same with the Tigers. The Tigers waited. It took a couple years too long to break the team up. But again, Gary, we've seen it over and over again. It happened with the Tigers in the 70s. They kept that team together too long. The Detroit Pistons, you could probably say they kept the going to work crew together a little too long. It's just how things seem to work in this town. So, but at the very least, Tigers are all unicorns and rainbows right now, so it's all good. That's all we're going to have to look forward to in about a month. Which is it's the other thing to kind of hard to wrap my head around. The NBA and NHL seasons are pretty much on the home stretch, right. So it's going to be all baseball all the time, sooner than later. At least when it comes to local sports. So, all right, with that, I guess it's time to. We've made the turn and we're on the home stretch. So, who is your jerk of the week?
Al, what do you think of when I say, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Literally the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the New York Jets.
When I think of New York Jets, the first thing that comes to my mind, I say Joe Namath.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is an organization. Now, we obviously in Detroit, we always talk about the Lions being losers and they can't get it together. 63 years since their last championship, blah, blah, blah. You take that one magical year away from the Jets, the 1968 season where Namath, who really didn't even have a very good game against the Colts, but they beat the Colts with their defense more than anything in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You take that away from that franchise, and that was 51, 52 years ago.
Yeah.
That franchise is the Lions of the AFC.
Yeah.
With their boneheaded drafts, their multitude of coaches, the Sam Darnold debacle, which, he's turned out to be potentially a bust.
Yeah.
Drafting Kyle Brady, the tight end, over Warren Sapp, which had the New York Jets fans about ready to tear down Radio City Music Hall. I mean, that is the kind of stuff that, and Richie Kotite is their coach and a bunch of other garbage. That franchise, now you say, well, why am I making them my jerk of the week on April 7th, 2021? It's just that this Sam Darnold trade, to me, for a league that's based in New York, of course, the Giants have had much success over the years. They've won a couple of Super Bowls. They've been in the playoffs. They've had star players. They don't seem to be a franchise, although they've had their problems, but they've never been as dysfunctional as the Jets, the other team in New York. It's kind of like a Yankees-Mets thing going on.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm making them my jerk of the week is because the Sam Darnold trade once again highlights where this franchise is. And once again, now they're wandering around, but they don't have a quarterback. They're perennial losers. They've never, other than that Namath year, they haven't been close. They may have made one AFC championship game in my lifetime, which in the Lions have even made no match that.
Yeah,
I don't think they've been to more than one AFC championship game, and if I'm wrong, it's not more than two. They've not really been close to fielding a championship caliber team in really the team's existence, because they weren't very good when they were in the AFL. It wasn't until Namath joined them that they were even relevant in the AFL, let alone the NFL.
Right.
And now here we are, once again with the Jets. I feel sorry for that fan base, because they've had absolutely nothing. A lot of those fans now, they're too young they don't remember Joe Namath. They don't remember those years. They're way too young. They weren't even born. A lot of them were born 20 years after Namath had that year. So, the Jets are my jerk of the week, because they can't get it together, and they seem to get a free pass. They seem to get a pass. That whenever lousy teams are talked about in the NFL, the Jets are never, except for by Jets fans, of course, the Jets are never talked about. It's like, because why? Because of what you just said. They think about Joe Namath. They romanticize the Jets. There's this. They had that year where they upset the big bad Colts. And so Namath's in the Hall of Fame, and he, even though he doesn't have very good numbers, but there he is, and they get a pass. Nobody ever gets on the Jets for being bad and being lousy year after year after year. And so my jerk of the week are the New York Jets, obviously.
Yeah. It's one of you would said if I had said Joe Klecko and his sack dance, or maybe Rex Ryan and his foot fetish. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good call. No, and for as much as New York City it gets romanticized, the Knicks have been awful for going on 30 years now. Obviously, the Jets have always been, like I said, calling them a Lions of the AFC, it would be, and nothing. The only reason they aren't considered that because of the Browns, essentially. Yeah. And and the Nets have been struggling for years trying to turn things around. They actually moved to Brooklyn from New Jersey, and that franchise, at least they still haven't won a goddamn thing, even though they're trying to put together a super team this year. And the Rangers, they had that one little stretch where they finally broke their cup drought, and then where have they gone since? You're right. For all the talk of New York City, their teams, other than the Yankees, their teams for the most part suck. Right. Or the Mets. The Mets have had a couple of seasons where they pulled things through, but yeah, you're right. But yeah, when you think about the Jets, it's like, what have they won since Broadway Joe? Not much. So, all right, my jerk of the week. I wasn't sure where I was going to go. At first, I was thinking about Paul Pierce, who lost his analyst job with ESPN for live streaming him being at a strip club. I mean, how dumb do you have to be to do that? I mean, nothing against going to a strip club. Right. If that's what you want to do, more, fine. But if you're in the public eye and you live stream it, you deserve what you get. And as much, and ESPN is not going to put up with any of that crap anymore. They just aren't. So, sorry, Paul Pierce, you did something really stupid, and even though you're probably set for life monetarily anyway. So what the hell? But I just got to go back to COVID. My jerk of the week. What's going on with today? The word came out today in the NHL. 21 players on the Vancouver Canucks have tested positive for COVID-19. Oh. 21, and it's a new variant. The Washington Nationals have 9 players on their COVID list right now, including Alex Avila is one of them. Here in Michigan, when obviously we were talking about this before we started recording, is we had over 8,000 new cases today. I think 8,100, something like that. Those are numbers comparable to a year ago when things were out of control. The CDC today said they want the state to restrict indoor youth sports because they think that is one of the biggest reasons why we're having this. A big reason part is playing into why we're having this uptick. And obviously I saw parents on the local news today saying, "No, you can't do that." Are you a medical expert? Then I don't want to hear what you have to say. That's pretty much what it comes down to when it comes to this stuff. I'm tired of loudmouths just trying to make so much noise that you can't hear the experts anymore. And that's what's happened in this country. It's happened in Canada too. Even though the Canucks thing, that's obviously there's some sort of weird outbreak there. I'm not going to cast aspersions yet, but by going by what's going on here in the States. And meanwhile, while this is going on, the Texas Rangers home opener had a sellout crowd of 38,000 people, and they were supposed to be masked up. If you look at the pictures, the vast majority of them could care less about any kind of mask mandate. And obviously we have every pro league is anticipating starting their next seasons in full with no restrictions, no nothing, having full arenas. And that's only, for a lot of these leagues, that's what, 4 months, 5 months. I mean, we're talking September for the NFL, for example. And I'm not confident we're going to be out of the woods yet in September. I mean, I'm going by personal experience here, people. Linda, who is an emergency room nurse, is absolutely exhausted right now because her ER is once again overridden with people who didn't take COVID-19 seriously. I get texts from her that she is getting fed up with this, and she said the people she's seeing aren't old. They're 30 to 50, 30 to 40. And they're obviously people who, either they don't give a shit or they got lax. They got, the vaccine is coming, we'll be okay, blah, blah, blah. And, the numbers aren't there yet for us to take our guard down. And it's absolutely infuriating. And what gets me, though, Greg, are the loudmouths. Like I saw a mom on Local 4 News, Channel 4 News today, screaming, yelling, all upset about possibly canceling indoor high school sports. But our problem is people like that are the reason why we're in the situation we're in right now. People who don't want to listen to the experts, and it's just infuriating. When people like us, we've done the right thing. We, for the most part, have stayed, either in our homes or places where we would consider very safe and away from people. And there's too many people out there who haven't, and our medical workers are at their wits' end at this point. The medical professionals are about ready to throw their hands up in the air and walk away from all this because they're seeing so much stupidity out there. I'm at my wits' end as well. So my jerk of the week are, I wouldn't even call it COVID deniers. I'll just call people who have taken their guard down and have, we're this damn close. I mean, I'm 2 weeks away from getting my second immunization. I know Greg's getting close to his too. And we've done everything. We've done what people say we were supposed to do. We listened to the experts, and we've managed to stay safe. Right? During what's been a horrible, horrible year, and yet I don't know, Greg. It's frustrating. Especially when I hear something like Darren Helm, the Red Wings, the Red Wing. I think they said that. I read today that the majority of the team has been vaccinated, and Helm says, I want to wait and see. Sounds like my 75-year-old mother who's listens to Fox News. That's, you don't need to wait and see. He had COVID months ago. He's eligible to get the damn injection. Get the damn injection. If I was playing on a team with him, I'd be wondering about what the hell are you thinking, Right. And we're hearing that from some pro teams. Like I know, the Cardinals, for example. There's a segment on that team that is making noise about not wanting to get vaccinated. There was the Chicago Cubs second baseman. He's like the 24th, 25th man on the roster. His wife was on Instagram, saying he's not going to get vaccinated because it's more than just it's more than just about the virus, playing up the stupid conspiracy theory crap. I'm tired of conspiracy theories. I'm tired about lies coming from elections and COVID-19, and it's just so exhausting at this point, And I don't know, Greg. All right, I told you I was going to rant a little bit by the end of this podcast, and I think that might be part of my rant. So my jerk of the week are people who have not taken COVID-19 seriously. If you want to go to a full stadium in the fall, wear a goddamn mask and try to stay home as much as possible. That's all you got to do until you get your vaccine. That's all we're asking. And there's too many people out there who don't. So that's my jerk.
Well, I can't disagree with you at all about that. Yeah. That's a good one. I want to real quick just say that read me at my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every week. Check me out on Twitter at Greg Ito. The Knee Jerks can be followed on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense, and for you, Big Al, for making Well, this case, Wednesday night still got you.
It's interesting. As I'm watching you on video here, I'm seeing I can barely see the wall behind you now. It was bright sunlight when we first started this podcast. So then again, it is as we're recording this, it's after 9 p.m. now. So it is past sundown. So we got to finish this up because Greg's going to turn into a pumpkin. So, as always, thank you, Greg, for taking time out, and no worries about recording a day late. No big deal. As long as we get I missed ranting because we weren't able to rant 2 weeks ago because I was a little under the weather from my vaccine shot. Thank you very much. So, and no problems for the next one because my next shot will be during our off week. So, regardless, you want to listen to the show. We're available in the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, thekneejerks.net, where all the links and show notes will be, and you can right-click on your computer there. Anywhere podcasts are aggregated, you can find a Knee Jerks. Just search the Knee Jerks or search the Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al, and you will find the show. Obviously, Greg mentioned you can find us on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook. So I think that about wraps it up. I want to give a shout-out to Linda, who is home resting. She is off tonight. Obviously, she just got off 6 straight days in the ER putting up with COVID-idiots. So she's tired, to say the very least. So, and it makes me outraged, but enough of that. Regardless of all that, we will be back in 2 weeks. We'll have a chance to talk about what happened at the trade deadline for the Red Wings. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about Akil Baddoo being the leader for the AL MVP. And actually, we'll be pushing the NFL draft. Hopefully, there'll be more rumors to talk about. So until that time, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, Italy, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.